Okay, Paul, you're going to want to go ahead and unmute, please.
Okay, I think I've unmuted.
Yes, you have.
And can you see the Paul Lucero slide, or do I need to move that?
No, we can see it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all this evening to the continuation of the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. I contacted Paul Lucero. I actually had the privilege of going to the First Peoples conference at Chihuahua a month or so ago, and had a chance to meet him there, and he agreed to share his testimony. But Janae has checked in and found that he is ill, and so we'll substitute by letting me share a bit of his testimony that shows up that I was able to pull off the internet. And then we'll go to the prayer, and then I'll share some testimony and invite the rest of you to do the same for this evening. We will modify our program. Turning the clock back over 1,000 years, a prophet by the name of Moroni was wrapping things up, writing on brass plates, because he could feel danger was nearby as his people's enemies were looking for anyone who claimed to be Christians, so they could exterminate them without mercy. Their hate against his people was boundless and motivated them to be creative in their torture. For some reason, Moroni hoped that his writings would enlighten whoever was left alive to not make the same mistakes that his own people made to provoke their enemies into such demonic behavior. He mourned for his people because they had turned their backs on their God. They had inherited a rich history of Christianity. Much of it was written on temple walls or inscribed in their books by talented authors and prophets like Moroni. Unfortunately, their days were now numbered unless the Lord took them to heaven via translation. And we see in Moroni 6:9, their meetings were conducted by the church after the manner of the workings of the Spirit and by the power of the Holy Ghost. For as the power of the Holy Ghost led them, whether to preach or exhort or to pray or to supplicate or to sing, even so it was done. He shared an experience that I want to share in detail here. He said, I was reflecting on an experience that occurred to me many years ago when my comfortable theology was slapped across the face. A young woman in her early 20s wanted some spiritual help. She'd been caught up in a dangerous relationship that was consuming her. Her boyfriend, a drug dealer, in her own words, was stronger than she was. She feared for her soul was being drained by this man's control. At this time, I had a comfortable belief system all wrapped up in a pretty package. Heaven, hell, a church that saves you, and God who favors Christians. With this arsenal, my religion, I could help her. We talked about a lot of things until there was a moment when I looked at her that someone or something pulled a switch, and I was looking into her soul. Now, instead of her, I was looking at a vast area that I perceived to be like one of the Great Lakes. As far as I could see, there was no end to this vastness. In all three directions, there was only space and an empty lake with filaments of vapor and heat snaking their way upward from the crusty earth. Then the Spirit of the Creator spoke to my heart and said, this was her soul. So broad, so wide, so endless. As far as I could see, this wounded child of 22 years, her soul was dying of thirst for the living water. She was the deer in the desert, thirsting for God. The Spirit showed me a pail of water at the shore of her soul. The Lord was telling me that of myself, I nor anyone else could quench the soul of this child, whose spirit was vast and endless. Only Jesus, who once told a Samaritan woman, I've got water for you that is living water, and you will never thirst again, could fill that empty lake. I'm forever grateful for that slap in the face. I have been slapped many times since then, and each time there's a new understanding of a God who cannot be contained and put into a box. I'm deeply touched by his perception of a soul that reaches beyond our perception. And then I also have had the joy of visiting Kenyon Duché, and so he has another remarkable commentary here. The rugged beauty of Kenyon Duché speaks of your soul, speaks to your soul. The 700-foot red cliffs tell the history of the Navajos' determination to not be conquered by the huge boulders towering above and within the deep canyon that goes on for miles. Instead, the people chose to honor this sacred place as a living entity and to learn from her wisdom. They recognize her as a relative with such respect that they have become one. You can see the faces of the ancient ones shaped in the rock formations. The rugged beauty of Kenyon Duché speaks to your soul. The 700-foot red cliffs tell the history of the Navajos' determination to not be conquered by the huge boulders towering above and within the deep canyon that goes on for miles. Instead, the people chose to honor this sacred place as a living entity and to learn from her wisdom. They recognize her as a relative with such respect that they have become one. You can see the faces of the ancient ones shaped in the rock formations. With that brief introduction to Paul Lucero, sharing some of his words, perceptions, I am pleased to introduce him. I'm sad that he's not able to be with us tonight, and so I would ask for you to join me in a prayer for him. Great Spirit, we thank you for the gift of the message that we've already received from Brother Lucero, and we ask that you would help us to have our hearts and minds open to receive more of that great Spirit, that Spirit that permeates the whole of creation beyond our ability to see, beyond this beautiful world of life on land, in the air, and in the sea. We raise our faces to the breeze to embrace your presence, the drum throb heartbeat of life, the pulse of sap in trees, evidence of a hopeful attitude. And we open our hands, our arms, our hearts to receive you, to welcome you with gratitude. For everything you have created offers eloquent testimony of your intent to have us live in harmony. We seek that harmony in our lives, that wars and conflicts cease, that we learn the language of your love, the culture of your peace. This evening, as we share testimony, especially that from Brother Paul Lucero, we ask that our minds be open to your Spirit, to the messages you would have us know, that we learn to live in love to our capacity, and that our children embrace your invitation to embrace living water and life for eternity. Amen. All right, I'm back to stopping the screen share, and so I want to take an opportunity. I had the remarkable privilege this week of getting a phone call from a lady from LDS lady from Lee Summit, and she was inviting me to share with the young people that she's responsible for. And so she, in the process of our telephone conversation, asked me for my testimony of the Book of Mormon. Not everybody asks that, but it gave me pause, and so I want to share with you my testimony of the Book of Mormon. For I read it when I was a child, read it several times before I got out of high school. I destroyed one Book of Mormon by underlining and smudging it so badly, putting yellow highlight markers in it, and it just simply ultimately fell apart. I am sorry I beat that one up so badly. I sometimes regret that I allowed it to go, but in it I learned an awful lot of lessons of life. And it profoundly influenced me because in those lessons of life, there's fundamentally a perception that the dysfunctional human family that continues through the process of history, fighting and killing each other. That's the family that we tend to see on the news. That's the family in which we get to speak, because that's the language we have learned. You hit me, I hit you back. Got to defend myself. I have a right to defend myself. Got to defend my family. Well, that is a language and culture that I think doesn't quite fit the call to build up the cause of Zion. And the Book of Mormon offers us a remarkable commentary showing episodes of the human family so dysfunctional that they're going around killing each other. But when they learn the lessons of peace from the teachings of Christ Jesus, then things change and they can learn to live together in peace for hundreds of years. And the benefit of people seeking the promised land and learning a language of love, learning a culture of peace, learning a whole new way of life. That's the call I believe the Book of Mormon lays before us. And the message is to all people that, yes, we do have a promised land. That promised land of Zion, that promised land in which people can live together in righteousness, in justice, in peace. It's, again, when my wife came to the United States, her father's parting words to her were, "Daughter, love the people of Zion." And so she had to choose to love everybody, because how do you discriminate against those that are going to be the people of Zion from those that are not? And so she took the philosophy that she would learn something from everyone that she met. And sometimes she got bent out of shape over them a little bit, but she did her very best to love everybody that she met. And she learned their languages. She was a polyglot. And so at the end of her life, when we had the celebration of her life, there were people from Europe and from Africa and from across Polynesia and from across the Americas that joined in celebrating the life of this beautiful woman, an angel with human skin. But she, by loving the people of Zion, gave an example, and here's rather remarkable that a Polynesian princess would, who believes in the Book of Mormon, by the way, would marry an Iowa pig farmer and choose, upon my request, that I don't like yes or no questions, and so I didn't ask her to marry me. As such, I invited her to build a home in Zion. And she pondered that question for a day and then came back with the affirmation that she had kissed me, and that was something that she had reserved for her husband. And so I have been blessed with 50 years of marriage to such an angel, such an invitation to love the people of Zion. And that, I believe, is the invitation of the Book of Mormon, that all of us should learn to love the people of Zion and share with them, reach out and share our testimonies with them, to do what we can to help each other so that we can all be there together, because the promised land is before us. We have to learn a few things. We have to drop a few things behind us that I think are dysfunctional and not qualified. On the day before Christmas, Rita came back to me to tell the family the portal to joy is always open. She's moved on to that other dimension, the spiritual dimension. And looking back at it, she says, tell the family the portal to joy is always open, but you close it by getting angry. You close it by misrepresenting. You close it by miscommunication. You close it by maintaining traditions that are not loving and beneficial to all concerned. But really, you don't have to close it, for it's always open. And if you'll open it further, she said, her advice was, have the children enroll in the spiritual university. or that's the direction that you're headed. Today, yes, you have the delight of taste and touch and sight and sound, these marvelous gifts that we have as mortals. But the gift of our spirituality, which lives beyond time, is the one that we probably need to be spending more time studying. And while most of us, I suspect, are in spiritual grade school, she encourages us to enroll in the spiritual university and embrace the promised land. That is my testimony, the Book of Mormon. And my wife, so much alike. All right, the floor is open. Other people are welcome to share their testimony of the Book of Mormon this evening. And I think we probably should have Deb keep people in line. And if you have questions, want to make comments and open the forum for discussion, that's in order as well. So it's a little bit of a different situation tonight since Paul has not been available. But we got a glimpse of his testimony in Canyon Duché and sharing with a woman who needed help.
Okay, looks like we've got Blair to share his testimony. Go ahead, please, Blair. You need to unmute, please.
Now you hear me?
I can hear you.
I want to thank Paul for his testimony. I have my own testimony of the Book of Mormon. I have been sharing it and reading the characters, but I'm not going to give that testimony here again. But something came to my heart when Paul said Paul Lucero was the subject or the person of note tonight. And I never knew Paul, but my mother did. And my mother shared with me a testimony about Paul Lucero. And I'd like to share that with you. It wasn't particularly about the Book of Mormon, but about a calling to the priesthood as an elder of my mother back in about 1981. My mother was active in the church, and I have my love of testimony of the Book of Mormon because of her. She wrote between the covers of the Book of Mormon a story of the Book of Mormon written for children. And she started that when I was 9 years old. And I remember her standing in front of the Sunday school class in a very small congregation in southeastern Ohio, where she says, "Do any of you know what this book is?" She held up a Book of Mormon. And nobody said anything. She said, "Well, I don't know much about it either, but I'm going to tell you about it every week." And starting the next week, she did. She told us a story every week that the children were in the congregation. And it was probably at least 3 weeks out of 4 for a year. She told the story of how Nephi and Lehi led his family out of Jerusalem, how they went back to Jerusalem to get the brass plates. How they went back to Jerusalem to get Ishmael and his 3 or 4 or 5 daughters, so that there were a wife for each of Lehi's children. I listened to those stories week after week. So I have a love of the Book of Mormon from that. But my mother was called by her pastor to be an elder in 1981 and 91. My mom was 81 at the time. Mom went to her pastor and says, "What can I do? I'm 80 years old. What can I do that I need to be a priesthood member?" And her pastor says, "You have a calling. I don't care if you're 18. I don't care if you're 81. I don't care if you're 180. You have a calling." But my mother felt uncomfortable about it. What was it that she should do? She decided to attend a reunion where my son lived in southern Illinois. A reunion where Paul Lucero was a speaker. Although Mom was well known in the church to the people there, she allowed herself to be called only the grandmother of Brad. And Brad had a wife and 3 boys. So Mom was Brad's grandma. He says, "I never told anybody." And these were all people that would only know me by my works of writing in the Herald and my book between the covers of the Book of Mormon. And so she kept praying for some sort of a message that would give her a sense of mission and what she should do if she accepted the call. Now, what I'm going to tell you is what I remember of my mother telling me. And I may be not quite accurate, but this is what I remember. She was in a service where Paul Lucero was the speaker. And Paul Lucero had finished his sermon and stood up and pointed to her. And to the congregation, he said something like this: "You see that woman over there? She has a calling. She's old. But Moses was 80 years old when he began his ministry. 80 years old before he began his ministry. Age is not important. It's the calling." I don't know all the things that happened at that point, but I remember my mom telling me about Paul Lucero. Until tonight, I didn't have anybody to connect him to. because I didn't know him. But I believe. I believe in the Book of Mormon. I believe that God speaks to anybody who will listen. All we need to do is be open, not tell God what you need to do, not tell God what he needs to do, but to ask, to be told what to do. And that's my testimony.
Thank you, Blair. Joetta, go ahead, please.
Janae, there's 3 of us Clees on tonight, and I think we should share our testimony about the Book of Mormon because it's been so important in our lives as a family, and Paul Lucero's been so important in our family. So I will start it, and then you join in with your part. I did arts and crafts shows all over the country. I had to do them because we needed money, and so it was always important when there was a show. And there was a big show in Kansas City, and I got up that morning and I felt really bad. And my husband couldn't go help me. The boys were at college, and I said, oh, I don't even think I can go. But you have to show up when you're in a big show like that. So I went, and I was really sicker than I've been in a long time. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Janae, you add your part.
Okay. I was in school myself, and I had not planned on going, but had that feeling I needed to go see if I could help Mom. And so I just showed up at the mall where she was set up, and she was surprised to see me and said, I'm really glad you're here because I'm sick. And I said, okay, well, go take care of yourself and I'll stay with the booth. Well, she left, and pretty soon this native man comes, and he steps into the booth area, and he looks around, and then he looks at me and says, where's the owner of this booth? And I said, well, she had to step away for a little bit. I said, she'll be back. And he said, okay. And then he just plopped himself down in the chair beside me. I didn't know this man at all. And I just assumed that because Mom and Dad did craft shows all over, it was a friend of theirs. Well, he sat there, and we sat there and chit-chatted a little bit and just kind of watched people. And pretty soon I see Mom coming back up the aisle, and then I see her pause with a surprised look on her face. And then she came on in, up to the booth and in. And the man took one look at her and said, woman, you're sick. And she's like, no, I'm okay. And he looked at her again. He said, no, you are sick. And he had her sit down, and then he talked to us for a bit and about healings. And then he looked at her and he said, do you want to be healed? And she was going, absolutely. There was no question about that. And so he proceeded to do a teaching while he healed my mom.
What he did was ask me to stand up, and I thought it was a friend of Janae because I don't know who this person is either, so I'm just assuming it's Janae's friend. And he said, would you stand up? And I said, sure. And he took his hand and he went from the top of my head and came down across my face, clear across my body, clear down to the bottom of my feet. And all the sickness left me. And I turned to him because I've traveled with a lot of Native Americans, and I said, are you Cherokee? Because the Cherokee are healers. And he said, no, I learned this at the knee of my grandmother. Is there any more, Janae, before I saw him leave? We didn't practice this, so.
No, he just talked to us about the healing, and he then looked at me and said, "You can do this." And I'm looking at him going, yeah, right. But yeah, then he just walked out of the booth, and I watched him go down the aisle, and then I didn't see him anymore. And I turned and I looked at Mom, and I'm going, Mom, do you see him going up the other side? Because it go around, it go up the aisle behind us. And she's kind of looking and said, no. And then I just said, well, who was that? And she said, I don't know. I thought it was a friend of yours. And I said, I never seen him before. I thought he was a friend of yours.
I think it's interesting that we both just knew he just disappeared and he was gone. And I wasn't sick any longer, and Janae was able to go home. And we have always remembered it as being something very special in our family. Thank you.
Wow.
And just a real quick note about Paul Lucero. I met him when I was about 9 years old at a retreat at Camp Chihuahua. And he started teaching me native ways at that point in time. So I've known him and been involved with different activities with him through the years since then. Say about that much.
Thank you, Janae and Joetta. Monty, go ahead. You need to unmute. Thank
I
you.
had to unmute myself there first. I've been enjoying listening to everybody else so much that I actually didn't have anything to say at the beginning there. My testimony of the Book of Mormon is as I see it as an integral part of the scriptural testimony of Jesus Christ. And when we talk about promised land, in our church, in whatever church I happen to be around at the time, I see us as carrying our promised land with us. It's what we do to promote the teachings of Jesus Christ in an area that can help people learn how to treat each other. And I may not be saying this as well as I should, but I believe that there is no geographical promised land. What there is our perception of what the promised land would be like if we could make it happen, and then we've got to help make it happen. In other words, work towards trying to establish that in our hearts and our people around us. And to me, it's more of a way to live than it is a particular place. If it's a particular place, I'm in trouble because I'm in the county. That's on the outskirts of Zion. I'm not in the property itself, though. That was the only humor I had today. But it's just the Book of Mormon helps to complete the account. I mean, it's not the whole thing by any stretch, but it gives you a better balanced account of what's taking place in the hearts of people at that time. If you believe it as a book or somebody told you it's a fanciful story. No, what's important is that you get the message that the book is putting across, and that hit my soul loud and clear when I read the book. I found I was able to accept it as scriptural, just as easy as a good Bible. But I guess I'm just starting to ramble now, but I'll let you go ahead and see what you think.
Okay, thank you, Monty. Alice, go ahead, please.
I was wondering if the gentleman that did the healing and disappeared could have possibly been one of the three Nephites.
Yes, we think it was. I've had 2 other encounters, and yes, I believe it was. And one of the interesting things that I didn't share was I always had a very busy booth, tons of people coming and going. Not one person came into my booth during that whole time. And it's just like they just kept walking out around the edge of it. And we noticed that nobody else came in.
Alice, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if anybody knew what Indian tribes were around Lamoni. We used to have
Box.
I grew up on a farm near Lamoni, and there's a Indian mound on it. And before I was born, it was way before me, but they used to come, some of the Indians used to come and visit that and then visit with my mom and dad, but it was way before I was born. And I just wondered if that is the Fox Nation have anything to do with the Lamanites, Nephites?
Okay, let me address at least a little bit of that because, I'm delighted to hear that you have a mound on your farm near Lamoni. I was not aware of any such mound, and so I would be very pleased to have a chance to visit it if I could, at least to know where it is.
Well, it's my brother sold it to somebody out of the family, and that part I own 40 acres of it, but not where the Indian is. And I'm prefer that the gentleman that bought it doesn't even know it's there. Maybe he'll leave it alone.
Is it close to the river valley?
It's really close to the river. I don't know if you're familiar where my farm I grew up on is.
No.
It's not too far from Terry Hut Bridge, but it's close to the river on the other side. I mean, some of the farm is right on the river, and the river runs right.
Okay, well, the mounds in Iowa, by and large, there are a few mounds in Iowa that date all the way back to the Archaic, taking us back 5,000 years or more. Some of those potentially as far back as 10,000 years. But most of the mounds in Iowa are from the later period, from the woodland period. Some early woodland, quite a few middle woodland. The ones along the streams are more typically of the woodland period. And the woodland peoples for 2,000 years traveled the streams, and they became the highways by which they were able to cross the nation. And so if you have any artifacts from that mound that would allow me to identify which cultural period they come from,
I don't.
Happy to look at it.
We used to find a lot of arrowheads in the creek. There's a creek that runs along the back of the property and goes into the river. And but I don't they might have some of those, my brother might. If I ever get a chance, I'm going to buy that piece of land and then I'll get a hold of you.
Well, if you could simply describe some projectile points, that would perhaps allow me to give you a better identification of the antiquity of the habitation. But I appreciate you raising the question. I would submit to you that on this forum we have had representations of the land of Nephi in Peru, in Guatemala, in Georgia, in the Malay Peninsula, in the Chesapeake Bay region. And we have also had a couple of presentations indicating that the land of Nephi was simply in Joseph Smith's head. And so with all of these diverse people presenting where the land of Nephi was, and all of them quite in disagreement, and yet very well convinced that they have it, it has been a very interesting experience for me as host of this program to attempt to moderate and try to help people stay amicable toward each other, because there's really a lot of good differences here. And at the same time, there's a lot to be learned. Now, I spent a year in Mexico, and so became especially fond of that particular geographical interpretation. And I live in Lamoni, Iowa, and Lamoni in Belize is the closest name to match the Book of Mormon that we have in all of Mesoamerica. And so that's a neat close one. My big brother, on the other hand, would point out that we have a dozen or more names in the Malay Peninsula that correspond with the Book of Mormon geography. And so that kind of correlation can be used there. Well, the idea of the Book of Mormon being specified to a given location then is something that I'm having to reconsider, because it may be that it's allegorical. It may be that we are talking here about an allegory of the dysfunctional human family attempting to migrate toward the promised land. And so, yes, there is, in that case, then every place is as a replication of the Book of Mormon message of people needing to learn the lessons to transfer from people of war to people of peace. And I don't see any other hand, so I would go on just a little bit more, because to me, this forum has proved to be a remarkable testimony of the Book of Mormon. And I thank all of you who are regular participants, and those of you that are not so regular participants. I started this because at Nauvoo on the archaeology, we had people from across the spectrum of Mormonism and beyond working together. We had people on the Battle of Nauvoo whose ancestors had been on opposite sides of that battle. And here we were digging and working together, trying to dig up the history and the evidences, and nobody shot each other. It was just really very pleasant to have these people working together. And we learned we had to be careful about religious issues and political issues, but as long as we were gentle and considerate of each other, we were able to get along quite well. And so when the COVID hit and the dig got shut down, I really missed that taste of Zion that I was getting by our summer archaeological experiences. And as a result, it occurred to me that having a Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum would be a way for us to work from our commonalities, which is what we were doing on the dig. And by appreciating our commonalities, we could reach across the spectrum of our differences to build friendships. And here we are now 5 years into it, and still building friendships, still reaching across, still getting along quite amicably, having very diverse presentations. And this evening to be able to hear your testimonies is a real blessing. I'm going to be quiet and give other people a chance to share. Monty wants to get in there first too, but please share your testimony, share your witness.
Dave and Christine are there first, and then we'll get to Monty. So
good.
Dave or Christine, whoever's there.
I didn't see them.
Christine's back in school as of last Wednesday, so it's just me.
Okay.
So I have a very strong testimony of the Book of Mormon. But what I feel to share with you right now is based on something that you just said, Paul. Joseph Smith, during his life, at one point, he said, I think in his newspaper interview, somebody's put in a newspaper that the word Mormon meant more good. And based on my reading of what was written there, I think that was Joseph Smith's wit and sense of humor. I don't think he was being literal. I in translating the plates of brass, the word Mormon is in it, and in the Hebrew it shows up as that I see as the letters Mem, Resh, Mem, Nun. So Mormon. There's no vowels in the Hebrew. And the translation that shows up the English for me is wilderness. The word wilderness in Hebrew means mouth. And so whenever someone asks me now where the Book of Mormon took place, I like to wax poetic and say, wherever you hear the voice of God, that is where the Book of Mormon is happening. So I just want to bear you my testimony that is where the Book of Mormon is to me, that it's where the Holy Spirit is and where we hear God's voice. I know that's a bit poetic and not nailing it down anywhere, but I think we focus too much on nailing down where it happens or where it happened. We don't focus enough about how it changes us. And to me, the Book of Mormon is a message of Christ, and therefore it is a message of hope. And so that's what I like to focus on when I'm studying the Book of Mormon. So thank you.
Thank you, David. That is a powerful testimony. And let me affirm that to recognize that where you hear the voice of God is clearly either part of the direction toward or your presence on the borders of or in the promised land. Yeah, to me, having heard the voice of God, which penetrated my soul, that this land is sacred. To me, it's where I heard the voice of God, and yes, it is. That is, again, my experience of the Book of Mormon. Thank you.
Okay, Monty, go ahead, please.
Yeah, take off your shoes, fella. You're standing on holy ground now. You know, I mean, what made that land holy? It was part of a mountain to start with, and all Moses saw was that burning bush. Moses, yeah, and he. What I'm trying to get around to saying is one of the things that makes me feel so blessed about being a part of this group is I see you guys taking the book and making it helping it stay alive for people. You know, I mean, the only way the Book of Mormon can I don't want to say fail. The idea itself is if we quit talking about it, quit believing in it, and cut ourselves off from the story it's telling. And I'm not trying to pat everybody on the back at once, but you guys, in my mind, are giants when it comes to the support of the Book of Mormon and keeping the stories alive for us. One of the reasons why I got started in this group, to be honest with you, and he's going to be uncomfortable with this, but I already idolized Paul and Rena, and it's just this has turned out to be so much more than I started off with. When I got a chance to see the people who I've come to respect and acknowledge when I'm trying to learn as much as I can about what took place in those days and the different perspectives of it. Anyway, I just wanted to throw in that little bit. So you guys keep on going.
Thanks, Monty. Paul, before we get too much closer to the end, did you want to announce what's coming up over the next few weeks?
All right. Let me get my notebook flipped. We do have some open spots in November, but next week we have Ron Smith, and the notebook I have in front of me doesn't have his topic written down. Then the following week, October 14, is the review to go back over the previous 8, which will take us back to Scott Forscott, David Ferriman and Kristen, Ralph Williston, Rick Godisek, Rick Bennett, the Paul Lucero discussion, and Ron Smith. And then on the 21st, Scott Forsett is coming back with the influence of King Josiah on Lehi. And on the 28th, we have David and Kristen on Hope. November 4, we have Paul DeBarth and Jeannie on Amachromes. And we are open November 11, although I have some pendings. I don't have anything assigned following November 4.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Terry has his hand raised. Go ahead, Terry. Need to unmute, please.
There we go. David has a pretty good idea, because my background since I was a little kid, I believed in the more physical part of the Book of Mormon. I'd go to the public library and read every book on the world on Mesoamerica and South America and whatnot. And so when I went to college, that was my major, and I fell in love with history as much as archaeology. If I'd have been smarter, I'd have been in geology, but I wasn't smart enough for geology. But I could tell you where the Book of Mormon didn't happen, but I can't tell you where it did happen. And so David's idea is that it's a spiritual thing is very meaningful to me, because the Book of Mormon is all about getting closer to Christ. It's not about the things, but it's about getting closer to Christ. And there's example after example after example of how people were and then weren't, and then were and then weren't. And it's the biggest roller coaster ride story you'll ever read is the Book of Mormon. But its job is to bring us closer to Christ. And as long as it does that, it's doing its important thing. And that's what I'm allowed to leave with you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. That's neat. Yeah, I think that is a commonality that most of us will share, that the Book of Mormon brings us closer to Christ. To have that presentation that noted that there are over 500 references to the Christ in the Book of Mormon. And so for Christians to be able to enrich their experience with the Christ by reading the Book of Mormon clearly makes sense. And since the vast majority of those are references prior to his birth, then it's really a fascinating treatise to help people who are Christian perhaps expand the nature of their Christianity. I would anticipate that others of you have testimony you'd like to share.
Okay, Earl, go ahead, please. Remember to unmute.
Hey, you can hear me?
Yes.
I was always fascinated with the Book of Mormon, but it really came in- close to my heart when I went to Graceland as a freshman, and there was a group of 6 of us that kind of agreed. And I said most of them came from Michigan, not from Iowa. But as we read through every line in the Book of Mormon, and I understand, Paul, I still have that Book of Mormon, but it's so smeared with red and other things that when it gets to be wet, why it's now it becomes hard to read. But I have done a collection of Book of Mormons in a few different languages, but it taught me, I think, the bases of being a person, and to this day I still can't manage to live them, all of them. But that's the Book of Mormon. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. And let me, just as a matter of information, because Earl's pretty quiet, but Earl and his wife went to Nigeria for a couple of years. His wife to take care of people that had leprosy, and Earl to help people learn to grow better cowpeas and maybe triticale and other crops. And then they went to Brazil for about 6 years, and again, he helped to coordinate the cowpea industry and make it so that people could develop more disease resistant and more productive cowpeas that would have higher quality of food stuffs with them, protein in particular. And the result has been that some 22 countries in our world are better fed because Earl has done his work and helped people in those countries grow better food. And to me, when you read the Book of Mormon about the need for us to be able to feed the hungry,
Yeah.
this is someone who has responded to that calling.
I suppose you all know that cowpea is really the black-eyed pea in the U.S.
What was that, Earl?
I think most of you know that the term cowpea is a British term, and in the United States we call it the black-eyed pea.
Oh, okay.
And so how do we use the black-eyed pea in the United States?
How do we use it?
How do we use it? Is that the one that gets New Year's celebrations?
What?
Is that the one that we get for New Year's celebrations for good luck?
That's correct. Yes, that's one of the major known things about it. But you have pork and beans, how you boil them and that kind of thing. And that's kind of the way a lot of the cowpea is eaten. I might say that the bean is the poor man's meat. I think most of you have heard of that. In Brazil, the cowpea is the poor man's bean. In other words, in the South, where they can grow the bean or phaseolus, that's what is preferred. In the Northeast, it's dry and lack of rain, and you can't grow phaseolus or the common bean up in that area. And so that's where they grow the cowpea.
The cowpea is diverse enough to be able to grow in many different environments.
It is diverse enough to go all the way from desert to rainforest.
Wow.
It's its lack of diseases that allows it to do that. The most important disease is tobacco virus, which goes to everything. And cowpea is high in methionine, and corn is lacking in methionine, or rice. But right now my brain fails me. I'm getting too old. I guess I'm 81. I've still got a calling, right?
Thank you for speaking tonight.
So they complement each other, and that's quite often where you find beans is where you have a diet of corn or diet of rice.
Yeah, Rena and I saw in Haiti that that the ladies were scooping out beans on rice for the kids for their school lunch.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most nutritious meal they could provide inexpensively.
That's a good one.
We fed our cows cowpea hay, and I never knew it was black-eyed peas.
Harold, you muted yourself.
That's where the name cowpea comes from, because it went into Britain, and it's photosensitive. It under the day length of northern, it grows into a bush, a vine, and it doesn't produce much, but it sure produces a lot of green matter.
Yeah.
And so
They
they
love
use it for cattle feed.
Yeah.
So where was your farm, Sandra?
It's here, Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Ah, here is notice that the dispersity of us here is rather remarkable around the country. And so Stillwater, Oklahoma, on the red soil then.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, it is a little bit of river bottom land.
But you grow a lot of black-eyed peas there. I would say Georgia is the most.
Hmm. I just remember the cattle loved it. They loved it.
Yep.
Another Book of Mormon testimony. We're not accustomed to concluding this early, but we can. But I would like to be able to provide enough opportunity for some of you that are quiet. I mean, I hadn't heard Sandra speak before, so here she just got her foot in the doorway to introduce herself. From Stillwater, Oklahoma. And there's others of you that have commonly been quiet, and yet your testimony of the Book of Mormon is something that might well enhance the rest of us. Let me share a little bit more, because my wife's testimony, I think, is important. Rena not only came here with the premise that she should love the people of Zion, she defied the ministers who said, don't marry Paul because cross-cultural marriages never work. And she defied those that said, if you were to marry Paul, you have spotted children. Well, in 1969, when we were preparing to get married, we had to evaluate those premises, but she had crossed an ocean and a continent to find me. I like to tease her about having chased me down, but we did marry, and I think it was about 1975. We had two little girls that both got sick at the same time. I did not have health insurance as a teacher. We were struggling along. My initial income was $5,000 a year as a teacher, and so and I was trying to go to school and get my master's at the same time, so it was pretty tight. And when Hinata and Hayata, both those little girls, went into convulsions, Rena had reason to make a change. She had been told that there was no room in Zion for people of color. she had been told that you should not be giving your children such foreign names. Our children all had Tahitian names with significant meaning, and the kids have all lived up to those, and I'm proud of them. But the fact is that she found it tough to handle when people were culturally cruel. And some of that was at church. And so she stopped praying. And she had been told by her father, who had given her his patriarchal blessing, to pray all the time for her family, especially for me, because I would need it. But she had stopped praying because she was angry. She was upset. She had been discriminated against, and her kids were being singled out for being Chinese or Mexican or something strange. And here they had the strange names, Hinano, Hayata, Teani, and why all kinds of things came at her that made it so that she got frustrated. But when those two little girls went into convulsions, I saw her kneel beside the bed, and she put a hand on each of their legs. And she poured out her heart to God to say, I recognize that I have failed to pray for my children and my husband. I'm sorry. And ultimately, it became a matter, if you will heal them, I will promise to serve you. Remarkably, and the Book of Mormon is so good about telling us to pray over all things. And she believed in the Book of Mormon. She accepted that literally. And so she prayed for the children. She prayed for me. And when she got up from her prayer, the convulsions stopped. And within an hour, those girls were up and playing again. 10 years later, when the first women were called to be members of the priesthood in the Community of Christ, a reorganized church, she and I were called to be ministers together. And it was difficult because she came from Tahiti, where women are not even allowed to step on the marae, on the sacred sites. Gina's sister Angela exasperated me because I wanted to go to visit the maraes and have her explain them to me. But she even, well, last time we were there was in 2017, and even then she refused to go step on the marae because that was a sacred spot that was taboo for women in Polynesia. And yet, Rena not only defied that, she accepted that call when we went there in 1987 to be the woman who would occupy the pulpit for the first time. 1,200 people came to that conference, and her mother had been one that had spoken against women in the priesthood just a couple of months before the call came, and so there was plenty of opposition, plenty of difficulty. But Rena was called upon to speak, and she shared with the people. Many of them had memories of the house that she had grown up in, the house that had been built by her father from the crates that he picked up at the wharf, crates that had been discarded by the ship captains, wooden crates that broke, and so they were dumped on the wharf. So Rena's father, Abraham Faura, would pick up a crate in each hand and pedal his bicycle up the valley, and then they would take the crates apart, pull the nails, recut the wood, and he used that wood to build a house for his wife and 10 kids. 2 rooms with a lean-to kitchen on the back. And she told people about that in her sermon. She reminded them that some of them had leaned up against the walls and probably gotten splinters, and they laughed because they had. And then she held up a crooked nail and said, we had to pull the crooked nails and straighten them to build that house. And we are all crooked nails needing to be straightened to be used by God in building his house, his kingdom. And across that body, you could feel the transforming power of the Spirit as people recognize that, sure enough, we are crooked nails needing to be straightened to be used by God. And here they were getting that message from the Holy Spirit through the voice of a woman. And the following week, we shared a sermon. And the following week, the calls for 34 women were processed in Tahiti. Among those, Mareva, who, when she was ordained in 2013, came down and grabbed Rena first to hug her and thank her for being the Pathfinder. And Mareva, now as president of the Quorum of 12, is being called to become the presiding evangelist. What a transformation. Well, and in addition, in 2015, Lana Tetianui was elected by the Polynesians to be their senator to represent them in the Congress in France. And so this little lady of mine who came to love the people of Zion, but chose to love me and stay and face the prospects of marriages that can't work because cross-cultural marriages never work, and to raise spotted children who are spotted. Inano is spotted as the dean of finance at KU Medical. Her sister Hayata is spotted there as the coordinator of government grants for the First Nations people. Tehani is in charge of the office for her company. Hamana works for Cargill. She's the data lead for North America in Cargill. She's also our pastor and CFO. Our son Tehao put together the program so that if you get COVID, your cell phone can warn the people that have been exposed so that they can go get treatment and have their life saved. So yes, all 5 of our kids are spotted at the top of their careers, top of their professions. And we have been so blessed because Rena chose to follow some basic teachings in the Book of Mormon. Love people of Zion. Wow. I share that with you because her profound influence, you'll see that picture behind me, her profound influence was one of the significant factors that got this forum started. And she warned me that there won't be enough interest to make it last more than 6 months. And here we are 5 years into it. And she's a year and a half gone now. And she's still astounded at how remarkably responsive people were to the idea of a Book of Mormon forum where people could share diverse ideas and testimonies and be appreciated even though they disagree.
Thanks, Paul, for sharing that. We miss Rena for sure.
I sure do.
Kurt, go ahead.
Kurt.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that Book of Mormon. First off, I'm going to my grave believing in the Book of Mormon. I'm not going to be one who dismisses it. But through the perspectives of Book of Mormon, I definitely went full circle. I mean, I'm a diehard believer, then I get challenged, get knocked down with things like DNA and or stories of figment of imagination or whatever. But it's always come back to where I firmly believe in the Book of Mormon is inspiration. And I really like the comments earlier tonight about Book of Mormon happening wherever you may be. And I see that and I believe that. I do have my own personal opinion on where it did take place, but I do like that. The more I think about it, it is happening in people's lives. And I think we spend too much time dismissing the Book of Mormon because we can't prove it where it's at exactly, maybe with definitive proof. And we're missing the message. It is truly a great and marvelous work. There's so much words of inspiration in there for us. There's a message in there for us that we need to carry. And I'm so aggravated sometimes that it's getting dismissed in our church, and we need people like us and you to carry those words in and keep them alive, because it is a great, marvelous work. And I just firmly believe in everything in there, and I have to believe it. The Lord has blessed me with too many testimonies of just being alive today, and it's I'm just thankful. And some of the things I've seen, I just I don't really want to, I mean, it's just hard for me to describe. I'll break up into tears, but I've just been blessed tremendously, and I'll carry that Book of Mormon to the grave with me. And I just, well, I just wish we would really appreciate more the importance and the marvelous work that is in there, the marvelous words. It is a second testimony of Jesus Christ. There is another testimony of Jesus, and that's the message I think we're failing to present to our best ability. I guess best for me to say it. So that's my story. I'm not going to go to a grave as one of those naysayers. I don't know, God, because I don't want to stand there next to Moroni and say, I was wrong. But no, I'm going there. So I'm going to pat him on the back, or he'll hope he pats me on the back when I see him in the other side.
Thank
Kurt, Kurt, you were in KU Medical Center, and Rena and I heard about you being there on a very serious ailment. And so we had a special prayer for you and went there to pray for you and discovered that you had been released.
Yeah. I'll share one thing about that. When I was there, I got very sick here in Arkansas, and I was told by the doctors, you have to go to KU. That was taking care of. No idea.
Now you're cutting out on us, Kurt. Think you need to get closer to your microphone, maybe?
Yeah, I was on ventilator, so I don't know what was going on. And they said you had to go to a teaching hospital. So they knew I had family in Kansas City, so they flew me to KU, and KU graciously accepted me. And this is before COVID, but nobody knew what was wrong. I had a virus, and it went to my brain. And but anyway, I was out for I guess 9 or 10 days, and when I came through finally and was waking up, of course my wife was there the whole time. She didn't leave the bedside 1 minute, and I asked her, "Did we share a room with somebody?" And she said, "No, you've been in here by yourself, you and me, for the whole time." I said, "No." I said, "We shared a room." I said, "I know we did." I said, "I had a gentleman come in dressed in white on um, a bed, and two other gentlemen wheeled him in, and he slept next to me every night. And early in the morning, I knew, I had some sense of daylight, nighttime in his vision anyway. They would take him out and he'd be gone. And then the next evening, here he comes back in. They wheel him back in, and he laid next to me. And I desperately wanted to know who he was. Every night I thought, I want to ask him what's going on. How is he? I want to know something. I just wanted to talk to him, and I knew I couldn't. And I just wanted to reach over and touch him, but I know I couldn't because I was paralyzed. And the shape of his body was the shape of my dad before he passed away. And I firmly believe that he was there every night, sleeping with me. And then in the daytime, let them do all their other things they were doing. But testimonies like that, and then I also believe that I made it the majority of the way to heaven, but turned around and came back. But that's another story. But I'm glad I'm here, and so is my family.
Yeah.
We are too.
We're glad you shared with us tonight. Thank you, Kurt.
Okay, Monty, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please, because I muted you or we were getting feedback when Kurt was talking.
Okay. I'm with you now.
Yep.
Okay. I've talked about everything except my own experience with the Book of Mormon. When when I first was introduced to the Book of Mormon, I came by strictly by chance. I was an evangelical. I was attending a Methodist sunrise service, and I ran into one of the girls that I grew up with, who was a member of the RLDS church, and she asked me if I'd ever read the Book of Mormon. And I said, no. And she said, well, would you read it if I gave you one? I said, sure. So I did. And while I was reading it, I got confirmation from the Holy Spirit that this is scripture. And I'm kind of like Kurt was. I don't really care where it happened, even if I've got my own opinion. It's the fact that it did happen, that it is valid. It's a story of people learning to deal with God, but it also is unique in that the story of Jesus Christ was made an integral part of the culture long before the actual ministry of Jesus Christ in the flesh here. So I treasure the Book of Mormon myself, and I believe in it. But I was just saying that, whatever degree you do believe in it, it can enhance your life. It can help you learn the types of things that the Lord wants us to know, and make it possible for us to treat each other in such a way that we can coexist and feel like we're adding to the experience for everybody else. In other words, we're helping lift each other up. And without, and I don't mean that with it in a like guile or something like that. No, I mean that we have a calling. Every single member of the church does to acknowledge the not only the growth of talent, but the spiritual growth of the people around us. And I really have enjoyed and feel so blessed at being able to listen to you folks that that you spent your whole life in this experience, and it's something for me to sit back and witness and try to understand better, and it helps me to grow. And I'm not quite 80 yet, but it's just I still think we all have a job to do, whether we're priesthood or not. But my job, as I see it, is to support the leaders of the church. And and when somebody's a pastor, you help them in their voyage as pastor of their congregation. And we have the ability as a congregation to either make this a good spiritual experience for them, or we can make it hell on earth. I mean, your congregation is everything at that point. I otherwise the sermon's over for the night. I just wanted to let you all know that as far as my standing on the Book of Mormon, through the Holy Spirit, I accept it as a true account of what took place. Where it took place, I don't know. I don't care. that's not the message that we're supposed to take away from it. But that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Monty, and thank you for sharing with us. We still have a few people that haven't shared that I'd like to hear from. And I saw Kenneth was moving around, and then his mom got on briefly, and so if there's a testimony coming there, I'd be anxious to urge it. On the other hand, I don't want to be too pushy. Any of the rest of you? Well, we are approximately 9:30, and well, I've got 10 o'clock in Iowa tomorrow, and so I would be pleased to go to bed and get some sleep beforehand. No rush on that yet, though. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. Oh Lord, I want to go to the promised land, the promised land where a place and people of peace. Oh, deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground, a place and people of peace. And thank you all for giving us that place and being that people, even though we're two-dimensional tonight.